going to start my speech by explaining what the purpose of a parliamentary democracy is. It is a government in which it is by the people, of the people, and for the people. The people are able to elect a member of parliament that directly represents their interests and what they want the government to do. And these members of parliament are able to decide on legislatures, and they're able to decide on who the prime minister is. We believe that this is essential for allowing people all across the nation to be able to have their views represented regardless of their demographics or who they are. They will have a voice in the government and have a voice in what happens. Now, we believe that in strong parliamentary democracies, we oppose the idea of strong party discipline. The idea that members in a party, instead of voting based on what they believe and what they want to vote on, they instead vote on what the party lines are, which is essentially what the people at the center of the party or what the party leadership tells these members to vote on. Instead, we believe that members should be able to vote based on what they themselves want to do. Why is this a better thing? We believe, first off, it is better for representing people's individual viewpoints in smaller places. We have to remember, the core point of a parliamentary democracy is so that people are able to get someone who represents them and their beliefs. And the thing is that we have to remember this is a big nation. We're talking about the United Kingdom or Malaysia. Big nations with lots of people from around and not yet. Which means that not everybody will have the same political beliefs. We believe that, for example, you're able to have people who might follow the party beliefs on most issues, but there will be some exceptions. For example, in the United States, even if this isn't a parliamentary democracy, you'll have people in the same party disagreeing on multiple subjects, such as how some democratic people believe in supporting Israel, and some other people, like Zoran Mamdani, support Palestine. We believe that this means that people with different views are able to have their voices represented. Before I go on.
In the process of forming a party line, if you think that the party line is not representative of people's view, why would those parties get elected by people at the very first place?
Okay, so we believe that there are a multitude of political issues and a multitude of political ideologies out there. Because the thing about politics is that it is not just about one or two issues. Politics, when governing, you have to consider a range of issues such as healthcare, such as how your policy on the military, your policy on climate, etc. And this means that there are tons and tons of issues, and we argue that it is impossible to find people who will to have to agree on every single one of these issues. One specific reason for this is that this is a big country we are talking about. We believe that the policies and the positions that might impact people in, the urban dense metropolitan areas are not the same that will benefit the people in maybe more rural areas that are less developed. But however, we argue that there may still be people who agree with whatever this party is on most issues, but might break on one or two issues because that better benefits their own people. Now, we argue that it is still better for these parties to try to retain these people and build a bigger coalition of people who mostly agree with the same topics instead of people who agree on every single minute topic that exists. The reason for this is because it means that parties are able to grow bigger coalitions and are able to are better able to attract voters. We argue that if members of parliament are forced to agree with the party on every single thing, that means that the people who voted for that means that the people who might have more nuanced viewpoints, because we argue that these are countries with millions of people. We argue that not everybody's politics will fit neatly into A or B. Instead, we argue that people will have varying views on one topic and varying views on the other. So we argue that it is better to represent these people with members of parliament that will adapt and lead to their own people in their own constituencies.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. I think it's no burden from the government side to prove to us why prior to the election or during the election, why there isn't sufficient time for these parties to clarify their stance and deal with the multiple issues that you think is so hard to deal with. Please explain the justification.
Our justification is that parties will take stances on different topics, but what I'm trying to say here is that not everybody will support one party 100%. For example, again, back with the Democratic Party example in the U.S., even though it's not a parliamentary democracy, it still represents an example of a party who is left-leaning on most issues, but for example, they can be conservative on the Israel versus Palestine. We argue that despite the fact that maybe some Democrats won't fully agree with this agenda 100%, they are still allowed to maybe be more pro-Israel compared to their party elites. And we argue that this is better because then you're able to have people elect members of parliament who represent their beliefs. For example, say there is a constituency in a more Arab populated area, and they want to elect someone who will represent their pro-Palestine beliefs, but they still agree with the Democratic Party on literally everything else. We argue that in this scenario, in our role, in which there is weaker party discipline and members of parliament are allowed to vote based on what they want and what their constituents want, these members will still be able to vote for pro-Palestine. They'll still be able to make pro-Palestine speeches and pro-Palestine in the legislative floor. Whereas on this side of the House, you will have these people whose views on Palestine will be silenced. They will not be able to vote pro-Palestine because their party doesn't want them to. Now, another alternative that these people can resort to is, now we argue the alternative is either these people get silenced and ignored, or they try to break off and form their own fractured party. We believe that this is also not a good idea, because the whole point of a parliamentary democracy, these parties, their goal is to create a big coalition, get multiple voters, even if they don't agree 100% on everything, to be able to unite and pass good legislation. We believe that by fracturing into these small parties, each with their own nuanced views, two impacts. First, it makes politics much harder to follow, because imagine if you have 3 or 4 parties, it is easier to search them up and get a general idea of their viewpoints, compared to multiple parties with all of their own different beliefs. That's not very similar, but with 1 or 2 nuances. This makes politics harder for regular people to get into, who have to go to work and go to school, don't have time to follow politics 24/7. Another impact is that now this makes passing legislation much more difficult, because now there's a bunch more parties that you have to consult, because no one's able to gain some sort of majority and able to pass any legislation. And we believe at the end of the day, the government still has to do its job, still has to pass laws and new legislation that can't take forever. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your speech. And I have to invite the leader position.
What we see in parliamentary democracy system today is a lot of parties existing in the politics system, and then messing up the decision because there's just too many voices, too many ideas happening at the same time, which this is a burden that exists on government side. I will move on framing the whole debate, explain my argument, and prove that even though we are trying to implement this strong discipline system, we are somehow still going to be able to take care of minorities' opinions. Propose. Firstly, I would like to address that voting is not only targeting prime minister's election, but also other issues such as promoting legislation, etc. And as I address the issue that exists in the system right now is very slow process decision making. If you want an example, Brexit is the best example. You can see how UK tried to get a consensus inside their country, but failed. That is why the whole process takes more than 3 years. And why is that happening? It is because so many parties, so many different diversity ideas that is happening inside the UK parliamentary system that is causing this scenario unhappening. We argue that in the current system of British, what we need is not more diversity, but rather a strong image of how a party can lead a country. Diversity is not prioritized in the current system in UK. So what does these parties look like? These parties are not just singular parties like in Taiwan. Some of the parties in the parliamentary democracy system are 2 small parties. In order to win an election, they choose to join together in order to win by the majority of votes they get. So what does this look like? This looks like the members inside a party might look like they're on the same side, but inside the party they have different ideas of their beliefs, their party's interests. So that is why it's hard, even though that these strong parties are in the parliamentary, it's hard for them to have a shared idea. So moving on to my arguments, we believe, firstly, by having these strong discipline rules implemented, these parties will will show the public that they have the same goal. They have a shared idea of who they want to lead the UK in the future. And as I stated, this is a very important idea they have to send to the voters, because after Brexit, what happens in UK is right now the economic system is not really stable. And then they have the Ireland issue, whatever, policy issue happening inside UK. These are the issues that are unresolved compared to the Palestine idealization of helping or not. We believe that compared to UK voters' personal interests, these issues on international relationships are somewhat compared not so important to voters' idealization. So by voters' idea. So if we implement this strong image for the parties, it will be easier for them to gain UK voters' vote, to let them think that, we now have a united party with people who all have a clear idea of what they are going to do. And secondly, we believe that our House bring a faster decision-making system. My premise is still Brexit. Brexit basically happens because of so many so many different personal interests of people having different ideas of what they want, what they do not want. So when they're making treaties, when they're deciding on new legislations, there are many messy ideas flying around with very less consensus. So what will it look like on government house?
PR?
Yes?
So would you rather have a homogeneous state where everybody has the same political beliefs, or some sort of diversity in your systems?
Diversity still exists in our system. We're limiting the idea of having so many different parties. So what it will look like is, instead of having 10 dozens of parties, or everyone having to opt out of their own party's interests to vote for other parties' interests because their personal belief, I believe that, for example, we should support Palestine, we should support Israel. Instead of having so many different choices for you to make, you can limit your choices down to 3 or 4, and that is easier for a country to have a goal, to have an idea of what you actually want. So what it will look like is, first of all, in our Senate House, we resolve issues later. We resolve issues more efficiently. And okay, I'll figure it out.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
So how can you guarantee that everybody will have the same goals? Because not everybody wants to support Palestine. Not everybody in the parliament wants to support Palestine all of a sudden.
We cannot be sure that everyone who is forced by strong discipline is going to have is going to agree with the same decision, is going for a same goal. But we're arguing that by limiting the choices these people have, by forcing them to only follow the strong discipline rules that their party interests want, which is more likely to be benefiting UK voters, to be benefiting their own country, because the party wants to get elected. We argue that this is the best for these countries, for these parliamentary democracy countries, because these are the ideas, these are the legislations that are actually going to help the country improve. And my third argument is that how we're going to argue minorities' opinions are still related. Because if strong parties are now implementing the idea of strong discipline, that means that small parties or individuals that do not belong to any parties, their vote will matter more. Because if everyone has a different idea of wanting to promote a different prime minister, the value of these minorities' votes will become very crucial in voting, in electing the next prime minister. So this is how, in our side of the house, to somewhat extent, minorities' ideas are still going to be valued, because if they want to get elected, they have to somewhat reach a negotiate with these minorities to take their ideas into consideration. And this is how, on our side of the house, we can resolve the diversity issues of some House still carrying minorities' ideas. And for all these reasons, proud to oppose. On our side of the House, we seek to set politicians free from the party dogma that prevents them from doing their God-given job of representing the people. In this speech, I'm going to talk about why, firstly, party power often is bigger than people power. Secondly, why we're better able to reach a consensus. And third, why we represent the people better. And then a flip on why under their side of the House, multiple parties is actually way more likely, and it's actually way more likely to be messy, even if that is no, actually against why likely to be way more messy. Okay, so firstly, that to rebut opposing opposition POI, parties are often especially with countries that are quite old, especially the UK or Germany, the UK, these parties are often well established and they're often very old, and they have a lot of sponsors, a lot of establishment power. It's a lot of establishment power, which means often they're often organizational. They don't say all of them, but a lot of them do have corruption, and they're often very powerful in and of themselves. And then we talk about these incentive analysis with politicians. They're often it's minutes. Okay. These politicians, therefore, now have two interests, right? They have now their duty to the people, which partly is because they're directly affected, and also they rely a lot on public opinion. But now they also have the pressure of political parties that they have to adhere to, and often the dogma which is inspired by the establishment, and also because the parties are fundamentally pitted against each other and competing in a competition. Therefore, it means that often the loyalty to the people is outweighed by the loyalty to the party, because they are directly able to expel these politicians from their positions more than the people can. And why is that the case? Often that leads to misrepresentation in the case. And why is a party more powerful? Because often conservative bias, which just means that voters often don't believe that if they support independent parties or smaller parties, it's going to work, because smaller parties often take place in ethnic minorities, and therefore they often don't have enough seats in Parliament. They don't often have enough of a voice to actually voice their opinions. So they will take the trade-off of them disagreeing with a few things, and then to vote for bigger parties that will better able to represent things that they actually think are important. Okay, that means that to a certain extent, opposition has to take the unique harm that they're going to misrepresent a certain amount of minorities and people. Okay, so, no, I'm not taking the and to talk about why it is inefficient due to the inherent system of parties getting pitted against each other. It's going to take a super long time. And even if opposition want to say, if it takes a super long time, it means that they're hashing out their differences, and it means that's good. But it's not really that the case, right? It means that if you're a normal politician, there's two paths you can take under the system, right? There's if you disagree with the policies of the party. First, you can vote. You can just vote. You can vote according to your party lines, which means that which my team has fully already illustrated that's just bad, and I will talk about it previously. And secondly, you cannot vote and you just get kicked out or expelled, which means that firstly, you either just leave. Which means that it just decreases political diversity. And secondly, you form your own party or you go out to join another party, which means that there is enmity and resentment among the parties. Because I got kicked out. Why should I listen to this other party that just kicked me out because I have different political opinions? It means that they're less likely to negotiate, negotiate with that other party. Add on to the fact that parties already are inherently opposed to each other because they have alternative purposes, and B, in the inherent political system, this means that it's not efficiency where people are hashing out their differences. It's just efficiency where people are just fighting with each other to gain political expedience. However, under our side of the House, allowing these politicians to vote not strictly according to the House rules means that within the House, you think that these different parties, there are different caucuses. And why is it more easier for people to have the differences within the party? Because there's not ex-party interest, right? There's not ex-party interest like political experience. There's not gaining more votes, etc., etc. It means that they can actually negotiate with each other because they have a common goal of bettering the party and bettering the people to one united opinion, which means that they're easier to. It means that they don't need to consider party enmity, and therefore they are able to better reach a consensus. They're better able to reach a consensus because they do not need to think about all these different other things. Okay. What else? Okay, right, this. And then we're gonna flip, right? Under their side of the house, multiple parties is way more under their side of the house, multiple parties is way more likely. Like I said, right? The whole if you get kicked out of a party, it's kind of if you want to continue your political career, you kind of have to go to the party, or you establish your own party, which means that it's likely that is more likely going to happen on their side of the house. And then if we're able to prove that if we're able to prove that we're better able to reach a consensus because we don't need to talk about X factors, and secondly that we're able to represent the people better because there are different caucuses within these parties, right? So bigger parties have bigger establishment power. They have better establishment power means they're better able to allow these minorities to speak out within that caucus, and because they believe that this is going to further their party interests, then that's why they have the incentive to listen to them, as opposed to under their side of the house, where they're an independent party and they're opposed to them, and they're less likely to listen to them because there's also the fact that they're a competing enemy, and therefore it is less likely that they're going to actually represent the interests of the minorities as opposed to on our side of the house because they're part of the coalition, right? So you gotta benefit them too. So we take three benefits. First, bigger coalition. Secondly, better consensus. And thirdly, better representation and also flip on this side of the house. Okay. Try to Formosa.
Speech that I'd like to welcome the team in the opposition here.
Start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first start over first. Let's say that people vote for a line of the party and not the people. However, first, every party have the main theme or the main idea they want, and people follow because they like the theme or they likely agree with the theme that the party is symbolized. So those decisions normally falls under those themes. So even though it's not, whatever the government bench said is not likely to happen. So even if the people does not agree with the 100% of the statement, but there will still be favor for almost 70%. And also, second, they talk about people have different kind of views. And all this comes from the starter belief. And what is starter belief is the main idea of the people's thought or the party itself. So if they have the same starter belief, then it's more likely that the view will be similar. And also, moving on to the big point. So nobody can fully 100% represent every single one's idea. So this or the government bench only are creating more and more party and slower the decision making and slower the society as a whole. And if this is the case, then why don't everyone create just their own like parties? Like on the government bench, they're trying to say that everyone needs to find a party that 100% fully represents what one single or a group of people have believed. But it's not likely to happen that every single one in the country, 1,000, 1 million people create their own party that 100% represent their own belief. No, because that's just simply not reasonable and not possible to happen. And also, moving on. So then I talk about that it is more, our side is more likely to create a party. However, no, because we are more organized and also all people are still be heard. There's not going to be very big conflicts within our stance. And also, to form our own party, which means they disagree on the big issue, or we can call our main themes, and not later. So it's not able to because there we have no money to do that. And also we rather go to other parties than if you don't agree, then why don't we just go to the other party since you believe that other parties' big ideas is more aligned with our thoughts. And yes, I'll take a POI.
Do you not want diversity in election turnout solely because you're convinced that your leading party will not win if there's a diversification of the votes?
Okay, thank you for the POI. So again, like my first speaker has stated that there's still going to be diversity. There's still going to be different parties. There's still going to be different main ideas. It's more about the main idea, what people or who agrees on which main idea would decide which party they're going to be in. And also, I'm going to address some weighing. So first, we definitely win on magnitude because we move the entire country and society forward. And we improve and make people as more open thoughts. And also, we align people with the main idea of the party. Of course, everyone will still be heard. But we just make lesser parties. But of course, the main idea. What is the main idea? The main idea is a statement that is more broad. That is the main thing that everything falls under. All the details and things falls under later. So, and we also want a time frame because our plan is a long term. The society will move forward, and it's not like just stuck on one issue and will never reach consensus, and it will never solve the problem. Yeah, I'll take a POI.
Are you attempting to make a monopolitical state solely because you believe that the less parties exist, the less voters will vote to the other parties, hence why your party will win because otherwise you would not be able to win the election?
No, because all people's thoughts will be heard. Of course, we are still letting people to choose which big idea they want, right? So if they don't want this idea, they will not be in this party at the first place. They will go to the other party that aligns with their main consensus. Yeah, and to summarize our argument real quick, so our first argument is about faster decisions, and we are more efficient to move the society forward. We have stated that example like Brexit is slowing decision making and cost. Because the cause is because like there's too many parties, it's too many different consensus, and also we talk about this allows faster decision making, and also it benefits not only the economy, not only the society part and the economy part. And moving on, second argument, we also talk about the interest of the party is more willing to protect, no, and of course it's more idea and more image. Yeah, and for all those reasons, I'm proud to propose.
And I drafted one about government institute here.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just begin by rebutting some of the ridiculous argument the proposition has made. First of all, they have said that they keep referencing limiting the options the opposition has made because they keep referencing limiting options just so the Parliament doesn't have conflict within themselves. So there isn't some sort of argument in democracy, which is the whole point of democracy. However, people will end up not voting for the people they actually want representing them, for the people they actually want supporting them, for what's closest to their own ideology, which is not for representation, not the point of democracy whatsoever. The speaker has said they cannot guarantee that people will be represented. They cannot guarantee that people will vote for what they believe in. However, the storylines historically have shown that there's change after the election happened, change in the way politicians act and the way politicians actually implement their policies. So people may not be represented, which we don't want. We don't want people to suffer and to protest after every single election, just because now they won't get what voting coalitions potentially promise. that there is a slow process in the democracy we have today. Slow process just because the politicians aren't restricted. However, do you really want Parliament to pass laws faster instead of actually looking at the quality of the law, having them actually discuss the law that we are talking about? That is why we are. The core of our argument is that the strong party discipline fundamentally undermines democratic accountability, representative legitimacy, and creates a system where the MPs serve party elites and not citizens. It erodes trust and produces worse long-term governance. Our extension that we want to provide to you today is that party discipline harms political diversity, which we have touched upon in our POIs multiple times, but were not able to actually argue against it sufficiently. Because this is the case because, first of all, minority voices within parties, people like women, ethnic minorities, ideological minorities, rely on stacking pressure and advocacy coalitions. However, what ends up happening is that under strong discipline, MPs lose bargaining power just because they cannot negotiate support in exchange for consensus. Their vote is taken for granted. There is threats of diselection, loss of funding, all just because you want the party to be restricted. What ends up happening is that minorities' needs are never included as trade-offs in policymaking. How does that make sense to you, ladies and gentlemen? How is that fair in a democracy, a place where you are meant to be represented? My second point is that strong discipline forces ideological homogenization. What ends up happening is that everyone will have the same ideology, even though you are a minority and you want to be represented. In the end, this eliminates internal ideological range. There is less and less range within the parliament of different ideologies being present, which is completely unfair. There are less and less role models for the different parties, for the citizens who want to vote for their representation. There are less people they see in parliament, and thus what ends up happening, they don't want to run for the party because they don't think it is possible. They don't see themselves as being a good candidate for that party. I'll take it in just a minute. So in the end, our impact in this case would be that democratic alienation will end up happening for the entire demographic group. Can you imagine this happening? You have an entire minority group in which democratic alienation ends up happening. And in the long term, fewer and fewer people will end up running for office. There is a lot of political polarization in the country. And that will keep on growing, and elections will in the end lose meaning, which is the entire point of democracy. How dare you insinuate this ever being a good option? And in the end, if you end up voting for someone, this representation you have in Parliament will end up being only a symbolic representation and not true representation, which is what democracy is for in the end. Minority MPs will become token figures. They will physically be present, however, they will be politically powerless. They're just there as a symbol for those minorities. Do they actually have any say in the matter? No! How could they if they are restricted? The party uses them as optics for inclusion, but they cannot advocate for actual policies affecting their communities. They're kept quiet to preserve party unity. These symbolic representation would substantially increases political alienation because people see participants who look like them, but they cannot speak like them. How would you feel if you see someone in Parliament standing there? They're supposed to represent you, but in the end they have no power to do anything whatsoever. Is that fair to you? That makes absolutely no sense in a system that is meant to be for representation. And in the end you have someone who's standing there, and they cannot do anything. Makes no sense whatsoever. So in the end, this structural exclusion is irreversible. This is not something that will just happen today. It will be irreversible for future generations as well. Multi-generational, your kids, their kids. Unlike short-term policy inefficiencies, the issues they keep touching on. Okay, yeah, it takes longer to make policies. Yes, but what about our future? What about the children who want themselves to be represented? The safeguard holders in this debate, keep them in mind, the voters that will not have representation, the MPs that will not be able to actually fight for what they believe in, the future generation, the minorities we've touched upon, the opposing parties that cannot actually know representing who? The entire society that doesn't feel represented in a democracy. Democracy, what it's meant to be for representation. They are not included just because of selection, because of restrictions you are planning to make. This multi-generational democratic harm will affect entire demographic groups who will become alienated. Entire demographic groups will feel like there should be fewer candidacy, they will not want to run, and elections in the end will lose meaning overall. There will be cross-party differences that will end up widening up, and that is why we are proud to propose.
Okay, thank you for the speech. Then I'd like to welcome another petition here today.
It is precisely because as opening governments characterize, people don't spend too much time on politics and don't care too much about politics. They need parties to help them form packages of policies that are called election platform to select from. And once the party is elected, the voters expect that the election platform will come into existence. The extension of closing opposition is a principal argument why it betrays the democratic trust if we don't have strong party discipline. We say that when politicians get elected, especially in parliamentary democracies, it is not necessarily because of their own merits, but because of his alliance with certain party, and hence people think that he represents a certain ideology and policy packages that is reflective of that certain ideology. For example, a Labour politician represents a leftist policy, and hence I can trust that politician will continue to be leftist and vote in accordance with the party line in the future. Politicians gain such advantages from being allied to the party because they have gained campaign resources, promotion effort, etc., and advance to the position of power. As reciprocity, we think that party members should support the party lines in order to allow the party policies to pass. If they disagree with the party line, they should no longer suck resources from the party and should leave the party simply, right? Also, if there is any dissent, as the side opening government and closing government always wants to harp on, if there is dissent in the parties, they should voice out their dissent before the election platform is formed, and hence diversity can still occur on outside the house at that stage. So what is the counter paradigm? The counter paradigm is that it basically amounts to cheating. Why is that? Because a politician is pretending that you agree with a certain party lines and election platforms when you are standing for election and suck votes by that representation. But at the end of the day, you betray the voters' trust by actually turning against your party simply because you dissent. However, you have already advanced to a position of power, and hence it is highly immoral for the politician to do so, and it betrays democratic trust. We say that during election, party will publish election platforms which promises certain policies, right? And when they get elected, these policies are accepted by popular will and hence has popular mandate. If members vote against the promised policy, it violates the democratic trust and mandates. There are two impacts. The first impact is to the parties, because the voters may deem that the parties are unreliable and make the parties lose vote. It is not good for the development of party politics, because the party is no longer trustworthy in the hearts of the voters when they cannot guarantee a successful platform to be implemented. The secondly is that it deprives voters from making an informed choice when they are casting their votes. Voters make votes for parties and expect certain party policies to be implemented, and certain party policies, but these policies, which are promised during the election campaign, may fail when there is weak party discipline, and it makes the entire process of voting in the parliament very unpredictable from the perspective of voters, because they will never know when will a certain politician suddenly turn against their party and not vote in accordance with the party line. We think it makes the voters unable to make any informed choices and cause their democratic will not being able to be turned into existence, into real policies, when actually politicians can actually turn against their party lines at their own whim. The third substantive argument is to address the impacts raised by the opening government and the closing government. Because all the impacts raised by the government bench is basically premised on the assumption that any dissent is successful. I'm going to tell you why it is not effective in policy change anyway. Because if there's only one person who dissents against the party line, you are unlikely to change the policy anyway. But if there are many people against the party, the Prime Minister's policies or the leader's proposed party line, the Prime Minister is likely going to be ousted or the leader is going to be changed in any way. And your party line can hence be changed and your line which suits your preference. Or if there are a lot of people who are against the party line or the Prime Minister's policies, they can also leave the party and form their own party and compete with others fairly. There's no inhibition for them to doing so. And hence diversity can simply occur on outside the house as well. And you have a point. No. Okay.
So, what I'm understanding is that on your side, there's only two options for the voters. Extremist party that you represent, one belief, main belief, or go home, simply leave the party as you said.
But leaving the party, why is it so harmful to leave the party, has never been proven by side opening government, right? Basically, as I've said, if there's only one person who is against the party line, you're not going to make change anyway in your side of the house. So it is a point that is at best symmetrical. But if there are already a lot of parties who is against the party line, they feel free to leave the party and form their own party and attract votes on their own. So we think that it actually provides more choices to people, to the voters, and allow the voters to vote more fairly and represent their will. So let's move on to some rebuttals in my speech. The first idea from that side of the house is that, well, it represents smaller places and diversity. I've already told you that these dissenting politicians can voice out their opinions when the party is proposing party line. If the party doesn't listen to you, they can leave the party or they can vote no to one single policy, and if they agree with the party's remaining policies, they can continue to vote in accordance with their own preferences. There's no inhibition to the expression or manifestation of the representation at all. And then they say there will be a lot of fractured party. They have never proven to us why it is so harmful to have fractured party. And even if they are small parties, there is way for small parties to join the government. We have seen coalition government between the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives in the UK before, and we have seen that these small parties can join government voice and become be represented in the executive branch as well. So at the end of my speech, please take away one important idea. We say that politicians gain votes because they represent a party and represent a certain election platform. If they betray that, they are betraying democratic trust, and betraying democratic trust, all the ideas about fractured parties and diversity can still occur on outside of the house. All the benefits can still occur on outside of the house. Any idea about change of policy cannot occur on their side of the house and is at best symmetrical. For these reasons, we oppose.
Respected panel, respected opposition and proposition, my name is Hannah and I'll be the whip speaker of the government side. I would like to start with rebuttaling opening opposition and closing opposition, and then later on moving on to the opening government and putting the whole speech. Okay, so let's say that the opening government clearly had this idea that was already beaten by my colleague, but it's that they can settle for 70% of the support of the political parties solely because, okay, not every party represents you 100%, but all of the parties currently in the initial system aim for the 100% at the start, and then later on if they disappoint you, but at the start you were believing in the 100%, you cannot just from the start believe in the 70 and lower it to 35% solely because you decided to lower it to 35% midway. You don't want diversity in the election turnout because the leading parties will need simple majorities to win. I strongly believe that this conspiracy theory is happening to the whole debate. They want to create this political system in which they either have two main parties, so let's vote for one of them, like in the US, or like third party representative. We've all seen what happened when George W. Bush was running for the president, and there was a third party, so the voter turnout was lower, hence why they were running for this one instead of this one, and hence why the one who decided to bomb Iran and so further on in 2003 won. Solely because we've had different voter turnouts, different things, which is basic political science theory. 2 days in a row I'm speaking about it. Is this why I attempt to do it? Is this why I attempt to do it? Because why someone's phone is ringing. Because the parties, less votes go to one side because there's a chance to go higher. No, you say they can still choose the main idea. Okay, let's all vote for the political parties where you only choose the main idea but not what the party stands for. Let's all choose me for the president solely because my name is Lana. You don't know anything about me, but you think my name is Lana and my main idea is that my name is Lana, so let's all vote for Lana. Why not? Cool, I'm a pretty girl, but is there anything else towards it? No, let's share the blame to people. You vote what you voted for, but then again, you don't give people the options what to vote for. And then the closing opposition said, why do people believe the party? But historically has been proven by my speech and by everybody else in this debate. We exactly said, the government doesn't show you why you believe the party. There's a whole side there that is telling you that, sorry.
Turn off the phone completely.
I turned off, I keep declining, but it keeps ringing.
Just 2 minutes. So you
2 minutes.
Can I restart?
Do you need my phone?
No, I have it here.
okay.
Can I continue?
Yeah, let me go.
So I have 5 more minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you say, why don't believe the party? Proven by our side multiple times is that, by Arab Spring, Egyptian bread protests, so many things happening in Sudan and Kosovo, we've seen why people cannot believe their political parties. If that's not common sense enough, for example, for you, Sarah explained in her arguments before, these people even explained in their arguments before, why can't we trust political parties? Then you said, form your own parties. Can I beat this argument simply by saying not everybody can and will create a political party? Some people work 2 9-to-5 jobs to feed their kids and send them to school. I don't have time to create a political party 5 to 9 a.m. You have to feed, you have to educate them, and you have to know, you have to take care of them. So people will not do this solely because they want to be reflected, because people do not have time. If we had time, everybody would be a politician and everybody would have their own parties. Now, take into account, even if everybody has their own political party, thousands of people voting, even if all of you vote for me, there's only 10 of us in this room, and I would have thousands of votes and still not get one seat in the parliament in a country that has 10 million people living in it. Or, even if you take the smallest country such as Montenegro, even if I have 1,000 votes to 600,000 people, I would still not get a seat in the parliament. Why? Because I'm a simple minority and representing a simple minority. So you cannot make your own party and leave a party whenever you want solely because it's not representing you fully. But you guys are not making them be represented fully. My colleague's argument and addition, extension to the whole thing exactly explains why opposition will not represent people's belief and political trust. In opposition's world, extremist parties are the only solutions. Yes, simply leave the party. But then if you don't vote, the lower turnout exists. So, okay, we have less people voting, we have less people participating in the election, which is exactly what Global Trend is not wanting. So what do they say? Either vote for the extremist party or don't vote at all. Go big or go home. Why should we do this? Their impact is saying, okay, this affects parties, these voters make votes for parties, but weak party discipline will harm them. Oh no! They assume voters only care about efficiency, but not about representation, accountability, and policy that my colleagues previously explained. We prioritize representation and accountability and policy way more than efficiency of the party. Because parties are either very slow, it's a global trend that parties are slow and they don't do everything the day after the election. When have you seen a tunnel be built the day after the election? No, exactly. But you've seen trust building over time, which is exactly why they have a 4-year term to create change. Why this debate has 3 clashes? Our course was that the strong party discipline fundamentally undermines democratic accountability and imposes legitimacy. And then we are talking about a system where MPs serve party elites and not citizens on your side. We want people to serve the citizens, which my colleague explained that the stakeholders here are people, minorities, MPs, and society, and not only the MPs and their individual beliefs or their selected elite around them. We're not talking about selected theory where private goods are fundamental and not public goods. We are prioritizing general public good, which is why our extension is 2 minority voices within parties, impact that Sarah already gave. I'm not going to have time to repeat all of them because you conferred the extension, that was quite good. When it comes to clashes, representation versus efficiency, opposition says strong discipline prevents chaos. Why our answer is 2 is that speed means nothing if democracy becomes performative. What does it mean if it only performs? What if it means if you only vote Lana but Lana represents nothing? We chose Lana, we get out of this room and that's it. What do we do then? MPs represent people and must vote against their consistent interest, even they're representing the people. They cannot, the local issues cannot disappear from national policy solely because you chose these MPs. Elections don't reflect public then. They're just going to be a beauty pageant where we're going to choose the most prettiest president solely because, okay, this is the lead. Why we win in this clash is because democratic legitimacy is the core purpose of the parliament, efficiency is secondary. Core purpose is legitimacy and democratic legitimacy. Weak discipline may slow processes, but loss of representation permanently destroys public trust. Do you really want to permanently destroy public trust? And then when it comes to weight of why we win this clash, is because reversible risks are reversible. You can recover from a slog legislation. You cannot recover from democratic collapse. Second clash was power concentration and accountability. So our answer was a strong discipline concentrates power in a tiny elite circle, allowing corporate capture and corruption, which is stomping bad policy and removal of checks on the executives. So why win this clash? Because internal accountability disappears, leading to scandals and closed doors decisions, making with no past scrutiny, with no law scrutiny. So impact of the one-time policy disappears that costs lives and cause long-term economic and institutional damage, and again, in our way to one catastrophic decision would cause years of slower policy making. You can choose what weighs more in this debate. And then clash 3, policy politics, debate versus echo chambers. Opposition says that discipline creates clear directions and unity, whereas our answer is that unity achieved through coercion kills policy diversity and silences minorities and MPs, which is exactly what Sarah is saying. Fewer perspectives, less inclusive solutions, no internal testing mechanism, higher probability of irreversible mistakes. We're talking about irreversible mistakes. So the impact is that bad law passes without scrutiny, minority groups shut out for a generation. In Parliament, structural inclusions happen. Overall, what we suggest here. So with all of the extensions, argument and clashes, we purely win this debate and we are proud to be closing proposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your speech. Then I'd like to welcome the opposition whip.
In my speech, I'm going to answer 2 questions. First question, will strong party discipline weaken representation? That's my first clash. Second clash, is dissent is going to be an effective tool to create meaningful political changes that the government bench really wants it to happen? My rebuttals will be incorporated into these 2 clashes. Moving on to my first clash, is which side better guarantees representation? I think OG talks about a very flimsy characterization of how people don't support policies anyway. But then I think in my POI and also my partner extension, we repeatedly point out that people can still voice out before election or when the party forms their line. And then representation still exists before the formation of this party line discussion. We think that this is uniquely pointed out by my partner. We think that diversity may be important, but then the timing is the crucial point that we are talking about in today's debate. We think that before the party decided to join the election, what will they do? They will conduct marketing research, consult experts, or do different political pools to consult their voters what kind of policies that they're inclined to. And then they will do policy forecasts to make policies for maybe the upcoming 4 years or 10 years. This part of characterization uniquely pointed by opposing opposition. This is important because we are the ones that will create informed voters, so the voters will know exactly what are they voting for. But in the process, people can negotiate and they can vote. And then within the party, they can also negotiate and discuss which issues should be prioritized in this upcoming election. So we think that this possibility still exists within the in-party discussion, which we heard no responses coming up from the government bench. But even if, worst case scenario, my partner already talked about why these minorities could still have alternative to voice out and to simply leave the party. They never explained to us why leaving the party is so harmful. It's like you join a company, you do a job, and you find out the company doesn't align with your own interests, and you decide to leave the company. Within I think the analogy still applies in this area. They said, we will undermine representation, but uniquely pointed out by opposing opposition. We believe that if we don't enact strong party politics, we are actually betraying our voters, which have been which the party has gained political mandate from, and also what kind of politicians are we creating? We are creating hypocritical politicians who suck up party resources and also the capital and pretend they will support that policy, and at the end they will just change their mind. We think this is the unique extension brought up by opposing opposition. We are the ones who truly protect representation, because we make sure that, of course not 100%, but we make sure that the policies or the packages of policies will come into effective. And worse still, what will be the impact of this? My partner talk about how it is like a betrayal, and in principle it violates representation. But what will be a more important impact in today's debate is it will affect the upcoming election of the party. That's why we think that at the worst case scenario, even though there is no diversity, we think that the party should still prioritize party loyalty, because so the voters will know what the party is going to stand for in the upcoming 4 years. That's why we think that predictability is more important than diversity in this area. And then not only we are giving choices to voters, but also we will prevent these politicians from making false promises. We think that we are the one who truly represent our own people. Moving on to my second question, but before the guest.
So, once again, I didn't get this clearly. So, your representation is either make your own party, which I already said was wrong, or believe the 70% extremist party. Am I right?
I don't think why this is like a false dichotomy, like you need to believe 70% and just leave the party. And I think it's your job to tell us why leaving the party is wrong. And I'm going to tell you why leaving the party is actually a good thing. Moving on to my second clash, is dissent going to be an effective political tool? I think what OG in the DPM speech, she came out and talked about how parties are powerful, they are like the old brand names in which people would really want to join. So if we buy into their characterization and fit into my partner explanation, you need to explain to me, in such a powerful political network, party, how can one vote really make meaningful political changes? We think that these, I think that all the benefits or all the harms, discussed by the Gov bench, only hinge on the assumption that this dissent will be effective. So I think my partner had already spent quite a number of time explaining how this is going to be effective. No. Let's look at what are the harms proposed by opposing government. They talk about how they want to help these minorities, and they talk about help these minorities. I think, again, we don't see that how these minorities could be helped. We see no mechanism to explain to us after the election or after the dissent happens, how will these minorities will get into the power if we buy into the government bench characterization of how there is an existing strong political power within the party. But and then the second harm we discuss is about how there will be a better quality of law and discussion. First of all, we think that better policies could be formed out under our side, because before the election, the party will go in check and make sure that everyone is on the same page. That's how we can ensure accountability of policies and representation. We think that this mechanism will not happen under our side, because people just vote irresponsibly and then they don't care the result, because the result is they will still stay in the party and still suck up resources and capital. So there is no deterrence under their side to prevent politicians from making irresponsible and irrational choice. Therefore, we think that better policies or better quality discussion on politics can happen under our side because of party checkup. Therefore, we